Welcome to Your Future Starts Now, the go-to podcast for extraordinary women who are ready to step into their next chapter with authentic confidence. I'm your host, Gia Lacqua, empowerment coach, motivational speaker, children's book author, and girl mom. Whether you're a corporate powerhouse or an entrepreneur, this show is designed for you. Your Future Starts Now is more than just a podcast. It's a movement towards rewriting the rules of success for high-achieving women. Are you ready to get unstuck and step into your next chapter? If so, you're exactly where you need to be. Your future starts now. Welcome to Your Future Starts Now. I'm your host, Gia Lacqua. Thanks for joining us. Today, I am so excited to welcome Emily-Jane Sarroff to the show. Emily-Jane's mission is to show entrepreneurs that the possibilities of what they can achieve in life is truly limitless. And the only thing stopping them from getting where they want to be is their mindset and skill set, both of which you have the power to shift. She's a graduate of architectural design, Jay Shetty certified life coach, business mentor, social media figure, host of the Empower with M podcast, and a six-figure business owner. Emily-Jane, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Gia. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to chat with you today. So tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to the work that you do today.
Yeah, so my story started as being a student in architecture design. Straight after high school, I was set on the path of going to university, getting the degree, and then climbing the corporate ladder. And I had checked off a couple of the steps in that process. I was right towards the end where I was 6 months away from graduating my Masters of Architecture and being fully immersed into my corporate career. And it was at that point where I really actually started questioning the path that I was on, and I started to feel myself being pulled into a different direction. So at the start of that year where I was diving into my master's degree, I actually started my podcast, which is the Empower with M podcast. And that was like a passion project for me. It was really a way for me to just document my own personal development journey. But then the further I moved into my master's degree, the more I found myself wanting to just pour all my time and energy into building my podcast and building a social presence around that as well. That's the path that I was on and I had been on for the last 5 or so years, was no longer setting my soul on fire. And when I thought about where I wanted to be in 5 years' time, I wasn't sitting inside of an architecture office. So in that moment, I really had to sit with the question of, who do I want to be? Where do I want to go? And in alignment with that, what decisions do I need to make today to ensure that I can get there sooner than later? And so at the age of 22 years old, I had to make a massive decision, which was one of the biggest decisions I had to make in my life up until that point. And that was whether or not I was going to continue forward with that path that I had invested so much time, money, energy into, and leave that all behind to move forward and explore something new. And I know that is something that a lot of your listeners can probably resonate with, is the sum cost fallacy, feeling like you have invested so much time, money, energy, whether it be into a career or into a relationship. And because of how much you have invested, you hold yourself back from actually allowing yourself to step away and explore something new. But I knew in that moment, if I was to stay on that path that I was on for another 6 months, I was going to be in a very unhealthy place with my emotional and my mental well-being. And because of that, I made the decision to drop out of my master's degree, quit my 9-to-5 job, and go all in on building a business around my podcast. And within just 8 months of having done all of that, I became a 6-figure business owner in my online coaching business. And that was the validation that I needed to know that the decision I had made and the path that I was on was the one that I was meant to be on.
Wow, what an incredible story. I have so many questions for you. Oh, what an amazing story. Good for you. I mean, I work with women who are in their 40s, sometimes their 50s, and are sort of questioning, they're on this trajectory that they've been on and or quote unquote successful on the outside, but feeling that discomfort on the inside because they are not aligned and they are not fulfilled. And so kudos to you for recognizing that at such a young age, right? That the path you were on, you weren't even done with your master's program, which I'm sure was a huge investment of time and energy, as well as financially. And then for you to sort of pivot, there's a lot of fear and uncertainty that comes up in those moments. So I guess but let's start with, what was that pull like for you? What was that call like for you? How did you recognize it? What were the signs that really helped you to see this is not the path I want to go down?
Yeah, well, when I really think about when I first started to feel the pull, it wasn't loud enough for me to fully act on it in that first moment. Because
Yeah.
when I first felt it, I was actually in my final degree of my final year of my bachelor's degree. So this was the year before I even started my master's, and I started to get this feeling of like, oh, I don't know if this is really what I want to be doing. This is exhausting. I'm not passionate about it. I had all of these
Yeah.
little feelings coming up, and the small little niggle of, oh, I wonder if there's something else for me to do. But I didn't really know what else there was for me to do. I was dabbling in network marketing at the time, but I saw a potential there, but I didn't fully feel connected and aligned to it. So there was nothing really that was strong enough to pull me out of that position that I was in. And so I let that niggle continue to grow and continue to grow. And it was when I was in my master's where it just got so much louder. And all of a sudden it became this, I describe it of like my head was pulling me in one direction and my heart was pulling me in another direction. Like my emotions were pulling me one way, and my mind, telling me what I should be doing or what I should be working on is pulling me in another direction,
Yeah.
right? And so it felt like this massive internal conflict that had begun to happen. And that grew louder and louder and louder and louder. And it reached a point where, I was crying every single night. I was feeling miserable. I was going into university and just like hating being there. And it was becoming this like experience where my emotions were actually creating other issues for me, because I started to notice that my mental health was degrading, my physical health was degrading as well. And that's really where that started to scream to me that, okay, something needs to change, because I don't know how much longer I can actually go on like this. So it was almost like, change had been planted in my mind the year before, but now change was being forced upon me because of the physical symptoms that were coming out.
Wow. And I think that is so relatable. And I think you captured it beautifully in the way you articulated it, right? Your head was in one direction and your heart was being pulled in a different direction. And I do think that's so relatable. We feel that inner turmoil and that inner tension. And sometimes it's hard to pinpoint, it's hard to give it a name, but I think that's so accurate the way you described it, and so relatable. So I love that. And the mental and the physical well-being, right, start to suffer. I think that's something that also a lot of women can relate to, in terms of, if you're not in alignment, we start to suffer mentally and physically. And it's so interesting to me because, a lot of the work I do, and I know a lot of work you do, is around that mind, body, and soul alignment. And I feel like sometimes as women, we become so disconnected from our bodies, right? That we sort of don't even recognize the signs when they are initially coming up. And then it has to get so bad that our body is screaming at us, right? That we're having heart palpitations, that we're having digestive issues, that we're having migraines and insomnia, right? Because those initial signs and symptoms we don't listen to. So I think there's a lot of power in, how do we start listening to ourselves earlier?
Mm.
And so that's, I think, a great awareness to have. Now, we talked a little bit about, as you pivot, as anyone pivots in their life, right, professionally or personally, there's always that fear that creeps up. So tell us, what was that fear? Did you have that fear creep up for you? If so, what did that look like? How did it manifest? And how did you work through
Yeah.
that?
There were many different layers of fear. I mean, I guess fear was really what kept me back from exploring, something new before I even stepped into my master's. If there was no element of fear when I first had that niggle, then I probably wouldn't have even stepped into my master's degree, right? So back then, there was this fear of like, oh, well, what if there's nothing else for me? Like, what if I leave this path, but this was the path that I was meant to be on? But then as I was in my master's degree and I was experiencing that, heavy emotions that were coming up, the fears started to become more centered around, well, what if nothing ever changes? And what if my life constantly feels like this because I don't ever act on it or I don't do anything about it? So that was like one fear, which was actually more of like an away from fear that was trying to pull me away from that position I was in now, because I was thinking about the consequences of staying put in that position, which not a lot of people think about. They think about the fears that are coming up in the present moment that are keeping them exactly where they are, instead of actually future pacing and thinking of the fears that will become their reality if they don't do anything about where they are right now. So that was one side of that scale. But then, of course, when it came to actually taking the action and pulling the plug on my degree, there was, some of those present fears of, well, what if it doesn't work out? What if people judge me? What if I let go of my degree and then my business doesn't work? And then I've made this mistake and I'm going to have to start from square one again. Right. So there's all of those same fears that probably your current listeners are experiencing right now. But for those who are in that position and you are making that pivot, what I would challenge you to do is to focus less on the current fears that are coming up for you around taking the leap, and instead focus on future pacing forward and seeing, well, what is that potential fear that you will be stepping into if you don't create change for yourself right now? What is that consequence that's going to happen if nothing changes?
I love that. So really forward thinking as opposed to being stuck in the moment.
Exactly. And I remember I would sit in my cubicle at my office job because I was working in the architecture industry while studying. So I was, fully loaded. And I'd sit in my cubicle and I'd just be thinking, oh my gosh, I am fearing being in this same position 5 years from now. I'm fearing, becoming one of these office workers who are miserable showing up to their job each day and hate what they're doing, but are just doing it because they're not willing to step into creating anything else for themselves. And that was the fear that I was really sitting with every single day. And that was the fear that was driving me to actually take the action to go all in on my business.
I love that. That is powerful. And you talk about in the work that you do, really facing the fears, right? And embracing them almost and learning how to take risks. So talk to us a little bit about that. When you're facing those fears and you're facing those what if scenarios, right? What do we need to do in terms of our mindset? Any tips in that area?
Well, here's the thing about mindset. And I know, it's hard to take this advice when you're in the thick of it, but your mindset is all a matter of choices, right? If you don't believe in yourself, you're choosing not to believe in yourself. If you lack confidence, you're choosing not to have confidence. If you are focusing on the what if it doesn't work out, you're choosing to focus on that story. And so when I would experience those thoughts of, well, what if it doesn't work out? What if I fail? I would actually develop the awareness around them and become conscious of when those thoughts were coming up so that I could make the choice in that moment to actually choose a new thought, to choose a thought that is aligned with the outcome that I want. So when you're experiencing those what ifs, start to change them, right? Recognize when those what ifs come up, the what if it doesn't work. Recognize when that story plays out in your head, and then start asking the question of, well, what if it does work? And how can I make it work? The thing about your mindset is just learning what questions to really be asking your mind in order to get the answer that's aligned with where you want to be. And everyone is so well trained in asking the wrong questions, in asking the questions that keep them stuck and keep them in fear and keep them from taking action. So if you can learn to ask better questions and become really conscious of when you need to be switching those questions in your mind, then that's how you're going to allow yourself to move forward, feeling empowered and having courage to really go after what it is that you desire.
I love that. So keeping the end goal in mind, keeping the outcome in mind, right?
Exactly. Always keep the outcome in mind. And with that, it's like developing the awareness around what outcome is currently in your mind. Are you currently thinking about the worst case scenario, or are you focusing on the best case scenario? And it's, again, you need to develop that consciousness around where you are putting your thoughts and your attention, because whatever outcome you do create is fully and 100% a result of the way that you think and the way that you show up. And so if are focusing on the outcome that you don't want, then what's happening unconsciously is you're showing up in a way that's going to actually bring that result into your reality. So if every single day you can wake up and you can remind yourself of what you are moving towards and really start to train yourself to be very focused on the direction that you do want to be moving in and the outcome you do want to be creating, then that's naturally going to create that shift where you start to become that person each and every single day who does have those things that you desire.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where some tools like a vision board or affirmations can be really helpful, right? And moving towards those goals that you set for yourself.
Definitely. Having like reminders all around you, plus your goals everywhere. Put it
Yeah.
on your phone screen, put it on your wall, have a sticky note on your computer
Yeah.
at your desk at work, and have those little reminders of what it is that you're moving towards. Share your goals with some people within your circle who you can trust and who will support you with those goals as well. And if there is no one in your circle, then create a new circle. Get
Mhm.
around people who have the same sort of goals as you or are already doing what you want to be doing. And then that's going to naturally help you build that belief and that trust in yourself that you can have it as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Your network is also really important, and the people you surround yourself with. And I love there's a quote that says sometimes your biggest champion is going to be, a stranger, right? It may
Yeah.
not be your family or your best friend. And sometimes it's sad, but sometimes that's true. And so it is surrounding yourself with the people who are going to help you reach those goals. Because if you are in corporate and all your friends are in corporate, when you say, I'm thinking about starting my own business, they sort of look at you like you have three heads. It's
Yes.
almost like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
And that's certainly not encouraging, right? If
No.
anything, it's discouraging, and then it makes you question yourself. So I think that's a great point about who you're networking with, who you're spending time with, who you are collaborating with. It's a great point.
Yeah. And it's a lot of people, surrounded by, especially if you're the one who's taking that step to really
Yes.
change your life right now, you're probably still surrounded by people who are dreaming a lot smaller than you. And that's not anything negative to say about them. But what comes with that is naturally they're not going to understand your vision, your direction. They're not going to understand what you're moving towards. And if they're the only types of people that you're surrounding yourself by, no wonder your mindset is feeling really weak and you're lacking belief in yourself and your ability to actually achieve the things that you want to be doing. Now, we can never expect someone else who doesn't see the vision that we see to understand what it is that we're moving towards. And so that's why you do need to surround yourself by people who have similar visions. And even if you can't get in the same rooms as these people, start listening to podcasts just
Mhm.
like this, or making connections online, or finding a mentor that maybe can support you virtually through the journey that you're on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a great point. Great advice. So when you transitioned from being a graduate student and your cubicle into, and you really immersed yourself in the podcast and building your social presence, I'm curious, what did you do to align yourself in terms of that mind, body, soul, right? We talked about your heart and your head feeling kind of pulled and, in different directions. So talk to us a little bit about what you did to align yourself.
Yeah, for that period in time where it was still in the decision making process, what I really did to bring myself in alignment with where I wanted to be was sat with myself, actually began to understand, okay, what are these emotions that are coming up for me? Can I label them? Can I start to actually break them down and understand them more clearly? And really just process my thoughts and feelings that were coming up. So I did a lot of journaling during that window of time where I was like in the decision making process. So that was one of the first big steps that I took to really align myself at that point in time. I also was very new to the personal development space still. So I wasn't really like meditating or doing any of these big rituals because I didn't really know what any of those things were. And
Sure.
so for me, all I knew how to do was journal and to really ask myself those questions and reflect and see, well, what is coming up? How do I actually feel? And asking myself that question of how do I feel and what do I want was really massive for me, and asking that to myself multiple times a week to really find that clarity and feel certain in the answers that were coming up. Then after I had those conversations with myself, I then decided to have a conversation with someone external to myself who was in the world that I wanted to be a part of. So that was where I had my very first conversation with a coach. And all it was a catch up over coffee for 60 minutes. And I sat down with them and, spoke through everything that was coming up for me, everything that was on my mind and my heart. And then they asked me one question, and that one question changed everything for me. And that was the question of, if you continue forward in the next 6 months of your degree, who are you doing that for? And my answer was everyone but myself. And so that was the second thing that really just like gave me that external validation of I need to create change. I had come to that conclusion myself already from sitting with myself and journaling and reflecting. But then after having, that coach to sit across the table from me and act as a soundboard and ask me that question, it just anchored into me what I knew to be true, that it was time to create a change. And so in that moment, like everything felt aligned because I now knew that my head and my heart were both, aligning with the same direction. And it was just a matter of now putting my action into alignment with where I wanted to be as well.
Yeah. Love that. So the head and the heart, and then the action plan followed, right? Love that. So powerful. And I think that awareness is obviously the first piece of that. The alignment is important, but I think even then a lot of people have a hard time with the action, right? Sometimes you realize, yeah, I'm not really happy in this job, but it is what it is, right? And those are the excuses I think that come in to play. And we tell ourselves, well, this is just the way it is, or I have to pay my mortgage, or I have to, feed my kids, or whatever it might be that keeps us in that small, playing safe space. And so I think once you have that awareness, it's tremendous, but then actually taking that next step is really important. And sometimes those big steps can feel really scary. And that's where I think the power of breaking them down into smaller steps and working with somebody like a coach external, who can help you really think through the planning process is really critical as well.
Yeah, completely. And nothing's ever going to happen if you're not taking action, right? So you can do all the aligning of your head and your heart and your chakras and la da 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 da.
Journaling.
But if you're going to actually take the action and do the big things and take the risks, like leave the job or go part-time or quit the degree or just launch the offer, then you're never actually going to make any progress. And here's the thing as well. I see this a lot with beginner coaches or entrepreneurs is they try so hard to fix their belief issues just through thinking, just through their mindset work, right? But here's the thing that you're missing. The best way to shift beliefs is actually through taking action. It's not through the journaling. It's not through the affirmations. It's through doing the thing that you're doubting yourself doing and proving to yourself that, hey, I can actually do this. And once you take the action, you build the belief, and then that's evidence that you could do it. And then you keep on going and keep on going and keep on going. And all of a sudden you have so much belief, so much self-trust, and that comes so much quicker and anchors in so much deeper than it ever will if you're just thinking about the thing.
It's very powerful advice. And let's dive into what you said a little bit more about the self-doubt piece, right? Because you can do all the mindset work, all the journaling you want, but until you take action and prove to yourself that I am capable of this, I think it does what you said, come back to that self-doubt piece. So I think what you said is very applicable in so many areas of confidence, because I think as women and men too, the self-doubt is so pervasive. So I wonder, how can we sort of apply that in many different settings, in all different settings of our life?
Yeah, well, when it does come to building belief in all areas of your life, like step one, obviously awareness of your thoughts. Develop the awareness and actually become conscious of when these doubts are coming up. Most people just go through life very unconscious of the thoughts that are actually happening in their mind and the way they're actually feeling. So use that as step one and practice developing the awareness. And journaling is great for developing the awareness because you're actually pulling those thoughts out of your mind and putting them onto a piece of paper. Absolutely. So do that part, but don't stay stuck there. So wherever it may be, whether it be in a relationship, in your career, in even if you decide to go rock climbing and you find yourself facing the wall and you're going, oh my gosh, I cannot do this. In that moment where you recognize that thought coming up, change the thought, choose a new thought, and then lean in and take the action that aligns with that thought that you are engraving.
I love it. I love it. And you talk a lot about the work that you do is also being uncomfortable, because taking that step can be very scary. We talked about fear, but it can also create a lot of discomfort mentally and physically, right? Sometimes we get really tense and anxious. Talk to us a little bit about, how do you step into that discomfort, and, maybe a little bit about your personal experience. What was sort of the most uncomfortable step or decision that you've made? Was it stepping out of your graduate degree into, this new role, or, have you had to face other uncomfortable situations?
Oh, I've had to face many uncomfortable decisions, especially across my business journey.
Yeah.
But I'd say the hardest decision I had to make was actually not even business related, and it was relationship related. And when I first took the leap to quit my degree and go all in on my business, like I was, 22, I was ready to run. I just put all of this like false confidence behind me to just push myself over the line. And that built a lot of real confidence and real trust in myself.
Sure.
Then at the end of that first year of business, I ended up burning myself out because I hustled too hard, because I was so focused on just hitting a monetary goal. And that's what, success was to me, is to just make as much money as fast as I can and as young as I can, right? And then I thought, oh, I'll be successful, I'll be enough. And I hit that goal and I burnt myself out. And at the same time, I got myself into a new relationship. And what ended up happening is that relationship ended up turning into quite a domestic violence relationship across the next year and a half that followed. And because I was already in a state of burnout, that pushed me even deeper down that rabbit hole of burnout. And all of a sudden, the decision to actually leave that relationship became harder and harder and harder because I had no self-belief, no self-trust, no self-confidence. I was burnt out. I had no energy. I was a shell of a person. And so that was probably the hardest decision, where I had to face fears that were, screaming at me louder than any other fear had ever screamed at me, and actually anchor into like self-trust to be able to move myself out of that space that I was in.
Incredible. And then good for you for recognizing it and taking those steps. And thank you for sharing that story. I mean, it makes sense, right? That's where you are at that point in your life. And maybe if you were in a different place, you would have not been in that situation. But I think it's all cumulative. It's all revolves around, how you are, what state of mind you're in, your mindset, your well-being, all of that factors into those situations. And so there's a lot of real power and strength in your story. And, whether it's an abusive relationship, emotionally, physically, if it's just an unhealthy or toxic relationship, if it's maybe a toxic relationship at work, or environment at work, what would you say to women who find themselves in a similar situation?
It's so hard, right? Because every situation is so different. But one thing that I can really recognize is that because of that position I was in, my self-trust was so severely broken that it was hard for me to really move forward and make that decision to leave on my own. So the biggest thing, and this applies to business decisions, relationship decisions, like wherever you find yourself in that pit where you are just so scared or so nervous, or you just don't trust yourself and you don't know how to move forward, surround yourself by people who have your best interest in heart. So I had mentors within my business who were guiding me forward, that I could have conversations, not just about business, but also relationships with. I had the most healthiest friendship circles that were helping pull me out of that place as well. And so the people that you surround yourself by are going to make a massive difference, because when you lack that trust and belief in yourself, if you can borrow trust and borrow belief from someone else who is aligned with where you're wanting to go and really does have your best interest in heart, then that's going to help you so much. And so even if it's like a business context we're talking about here, where you are wanting to leave your corporate job and you're wanting to go full-time into your business, then align yourself with people who have your best interest in heart and will align you with that path that you're on, and borrow belief from people such as mentors or other successful business owners, and use that to drive yourself forward to take the action that you need to take and build that belief then on your own.
That's great advice, because sometimes when we're in those situations, we are not able to see things clearly, but the people
No.
closest to us sometimes can see things that we can't. And so
Yeah.
I love that. And I love what you said about self-trust, right? I think we lose that along the way. So it's really important to how do we maintain our self-trust and that connection with our intuition.
Yeah.
Super important. So thank you for
It's
sharing that.
always going to be experiences that break your self-trust, but again, it's like, what are the stories that you're attaching to these experiences that are happening? That's going to have a massive impact on your relationship with trust. And don't allow one negative experience to hold you back from taking risks in another area and giving something else a try. Instead, even if it's failures that you've experienced in the past, don't allow past failures to hold you back from stepping into future endeavors, because instead, like, we need to change the story that's happening about that. Because if you allow your failures to hold you back, then the story that you're telling yourself about those failures is that those failures were a negative experience, instead of telling yourself that those failures were a learning experience. If you can reassociate that new story to those experiences, then that's going to give you a positive backing to really allow yourself to move forward and build trust even through failure.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Emily, just as we wrap up, I would love to know from your perspective, how do you define success, and how has that definition evolved for you over time?
Yeah, well, when I first started my business, like I said, I wanted to run as fast as I could, make six figures as quickly and as young as I possibly could. And because of that, my definition of success was based around how much money you make. But as I've gone through my business journey, and after making that first six figures and realizing how unfulfilled I was because of everything that I sacrificed in the process of getting there, I really started to realize that success is more than just money, and now I really define success as the quality of, I guess, the finances that I do have is one layer of success, but also the relationships that I have, my health, spending time having fun, how much fun and joy I experience in life, how much time freedom I have. So success is really a multifaceted thing for me. There's different sectors of what that can look like, but success for me doesn't look like just achieving 100% in one of those areas. Success to me looks like achieving 100% in all of those areas.
Yeah. Very well said. Love that. And I know you gave a lot of really valuable advice throughout our conversation. Is there anything else you want to add that, you would like our listeners to take away from our conversation today? Anything you want them to consider doing differently or changing after listening to this episode?
Yeah, I guess one thing which I feel drawn to share at the moment, and in relation to everything that we've spoken about and where our listeners are at today, is to start asking for bigger problems. And the reason why I say that is because the bigger problems you can ask for, the more equipped you're going to become to get yourself to where you ultimately want to be in life as a business owner. The bigger problems you can solve, the more money that you're going to make. And so you need to start asking for bigger problems. When you find yourself, if the problem that you're experiencing right now is that conflict between, do I stay in this path that I'm on, or do I go off and step into a new path, instead of rejecting that problem that you've been handed, welcome it in and say, thank you so much for this problem. This is now something that's going to allow me to become equipped to help other people solve even bigger problems of their own. And so something that I always do, whether it be reflecting on, my burnout, reflecting on the domestic violence relationship I was in, or even just other business challenges that have come up along the way, I find gratitude for those challenges that I've had, because they're the big problems that I've been asking for. In order for me to become the 7-figure business owner I desire to become, I need to ask for bigger problems, because it's those problems that are going to expand me and actually make me fully equipped to hold that capacity of business as well.
It's an incredible mindset. It's an incredible mindset shift. And I love it, because we're usually asking for less problems, right?
Yeah.
We want less, but yeah, it's a great point. And that's the only way we're going to continue to grow into our, highest potential. So
Yeah.
I love that advice. Emily-Jane, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your story, your insights, and your expertise. Where can our listeners learn more about you and the work that you do?
Yeah, so the best place to find me is on Instagram. I'm at Empower with Em on Instagram. If you send me the code word exit, I can send you through a complimentary training as well that will help you plan your exit strategy from your 9 to 5 job, because I know so many of our listeners are in that transition at the moment. Otherwise, you can listen to the Empower with Them podcast, which is streaming on all platforms and is basically an audio diary that I started at 22 years old and have continued to document up until today.
Incredible, incredible. I love it. And of course, you can visit my website at gialacqua.com, reach out on Instagram at gialacqua. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. This is Gia signing off with gratitude for your time and energy. Our mic drops, but the movement continues. Until next time, your next chapter is waiting. Take care. That concludes another empowering episode of Your Future Starts Now. Before we wrap up, I want to thank this incredible community of high-achieving women. Your energy, resilience, and commitment to growth are the driving force behind what we do. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate it, leave a review, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Your feedback fuels our mission to empower high-achieving women just like you. And of course, share Your Future Starts Now with the extraordinary women in your life who are also on a journey of healing and empowerment. Connect with us on social media, share your thoughts, let us know what topics you'd like to explore in future episodes. Stay connected on Instagram at gialacqua. I encourage you to carry the energy of this conversation into your day and keep on supporting the incredible women around you. Until next time, remember, your next chapter is waiting.